What's up and welcome to the episode of Gizmo Slip Tech. Today we're taking a look at the HP Omen 15. This is one of the best bang for the buck laptops out there. The only potential competitor in my mind for best bang for the buck would be the Acer Predator Helios 300. That's kind of like a question mark, but maybe this one even beats that one in terms of value. Now I've got a bunch of benchmarks and a bunch of pros and cons for this laptop. We'll be going over all of that in this review. Let's go ahead and dive into it. First up, we have a 15.6 inch display. It's a 1080p 144 hertz IPS level display. Now this features an i7-8750H with an RTX 2060 GPU, and this is not a max Q GPU, this is a full high performance GPU. Now this has 16 gigs of DDR4 2666 megahertz memory, 128 gig SSD plus a 1 terabyte HDD. Now this thing is almost exactly 1 inch thick. Now HP claims this laptop weighs 5.6 pounds and we measured it at roughly 5.6 pounds, and with the AC power brick you're looking at 6.9 pounds. So all that to say, this has some extremely respectable and high powered specs for only a $1,280 price point. I mean, as far as bang for the buck goes, this is it, I think, if it doesn't suck. That is the truth, I think. Now, before we get into the actual benchmarks and see how good it is, let's talk about the actual usability of the laptop and any other flaws that it might have. Now, the overall design is very gamerish. You've got this crisscross pattern. You got some really wacky HP logos and Omen logos on it. The keyboard itself is actually quite nice. It does feel a little bit plasticky, but it has deep travel and a springy feel to it. Now, the backlight on the keyboard is fairly bright, but it's not like hyper bright. Like, I'm in a very bright room right now, and you can barely see the backlight. Now, if you're in the darker room, you can easily see the backlight on this keyboard. And it does have 4 zones. You have the WASD keys, you have the left, right, and middle zones that you can all customize with a bunch of different colors. So that's pretty nice, it's pretty customizable, very similar to Alienware 3-zone setups. Overall, I give the keyboard like a 7.5, 8 out of 10. It's not like amazing, but it's not terrible either. It's certainly a decent keyboard, especially for this price point. Overall, this laptop has some of the best port selection in any 15-inch laptop for 2019. It's got basically everything you could want. It's got a full-size SD card reader, 3 USB Type A's, a mini display port for easy VR hookup, an HDMI out, an Ethernet out. As far as ports go, this thing is like A++. Now the trackpad is a semi-smooth plastic touch pad, and it definitely lacks the premium feel that you get with more expensive laptops. But overall, the touchpad works really well, and I didn't have any issues with jumpiness or unresponsiveness. Things scrolled just fine. So I guess it's like a B+ on the touchpad. Not the best feel, but functionality is there. It does have 2 dedicated mechanical buttons for those of you that prefer those over the inbuilt touchpad buttons. As you can see, it does have a minimal bezel design. That means the bezels on the side are extremely small and the top is fairly small. It does have a large bottom bezel, but the good thing here is it does have the webcam at the top. Now, the 144 hertz display is an IPS level display, meaning it has a lot better colors and contrast than your normal TN panels. I don't think this display is as good as some of the newer 144 hertz display panels that I've seen so far. Like the Alienware display that I have is certainly more colorful than this one. This one seems very reminiscent of the quality of panel from 2018. Know that this is an exceptionally good display for the money at a $1,280 price point. It's hard to find a better display than this one, especially for really smooth gameplay. Now, the bloatware on this machine is extensive. You've got a whole suite of applications that you don't need installed by HP. And then there's like one application that you need to actually tune the laptop, and that tuning application is simple and fairly well done. Didn't have any issues with that. The main problem is all the extra bloatware, especially McAfee antivirus. It's like spyware pre-installed on your machine. When you want to remove it, there's all these like weird things that you have to do that try to mislead you from deleting it, and then deleting it takes forever. Then you have to restart your machine, and if you don't delete it, there's all these pop-ups that occur all the time, and it absorbs your CPU usage. I was trying to do my battery test, and the McAfee antivirus kept popping up and using 30% of the CPU, killing my battery extremely quickly. There's very few things that make me mad. That is one of them. So the moment you get this laptop, you'll want to uninstall all the extra bloatware, or if you're me, just go ahead and reinstall a clean install of Windows 10. Now, as far as battery life goes, I did do a battery life drain test, but it was hard to actually do it because there's so much bloatware on this machine. The antivirus was kicking off, and I had to disable a bunch of tasks, And so I basically measured a period of time and averaged out how long you'd have a full battery charge based on that period of time, and it got to about 2 hours and 20 minutes of total battery time. Now obviously that was with Wi-Fi on, a whole bunch of tabs open, an internet browser, and typing up this review, so take that with a grain of salt. If you were to optimize this thing, reinstall Windows 10, remove all the bloatware, I could see you getting about 3.5 to 4 hours under perfect conditions, but that's only with a lot of optimization. Now, of course, if you do heavy duty tasks like some gaming, you're looking at closer to like an hour, hour and 15 minutes tops. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some benchmarks for this HP Omen 15. So here is a brief overview of all the games that we have tested, and you can see that it is doing exceptionally well, getting very high frame rates in all of the games except for Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Far Cry 5, and The Witcher 3. I mean, those are still well above 60, so that's good. And those are also running on Ultra. Now, for 3D Mark Firestrike Ultra, we had a decent score, 3655. Interestingly enough, this underperformed compared to the GX 531, which had a 1070 Max-Q graphics card. So that is pretty interesting. Now, when we switched over to Time Spy graphics, this is a little bit more friendly to the RTX GPU architecture, and we're getting quite a bit better performance from the RTX 2060 in the HP Omen 15. Now, keep in mind that the MSI GP75 Leopard is going to have nearly identical performance to the Acer Predator Helios 300. If you're looking to compare this notebook versus that notebook, you can basically look at that graph and get a pretty good idea of how the Acer Predator Helios 300 would perform. And fireworks are happening now, so Azusi is freaking out. It's okay, buddy. The Cinebench R15 multi-score on the HP Omen was really, really good. I was really impressed with it, especially since the throttled score just stayed right up there, right around 1235, 1240. So the downside here, of course, as you'll see in the stress test, is that the temperature and power limiting is like non-existent on this HP Omen. You're getting extremely good performance at the expense of really high thermal temperatures. Now, during our Handbrake 4K render time, we had kind of bad performance, honestly, from the HP Omen, and this might be partially because of the bloatware installed on the laptop, and of course, also we're seeing some throttling. We're averaging a temperature of 89 degrees compared to the other two laptops only having 73 degrees, as you can see on the left column. The Far Cry 5 benchmark put out some really good numbers at 86 FPS, outperforming the 1070 Max-Q and the 1660 Ti. Taking a look at the Apex Legends benchmark, we get 189 FPS compared to the 122 from the GX 531 and GP 75 Leopard's 181. This is really good performance, and Apex Legends is going to be a great game to play on this laptop. Now, this laptop did really well in The Witcher 3 at 70 FPS, outperforming both the GX 531 and the GP 75 Leopard by a fair margin. Shadow of the Tomb Raider did exceptionally well at 76 FPS on highest settings, while the other two budget laptops hit 65 and 64 FPS. So this is one of those games where you're really going to see a lot better performance from the RTX 2060. Next up is the stress test utilizing the Heaven benchmark and Firestrike physics CPU test. Now, when the computer is idle, you have basically no noise or very, very low fans. I mean, if you're in a completely dead quiet room, you will hear the laptop just a little bit. But if you have like something else running like the AC in your room, you're not going to hear the laptop at all. When you're in the default fan profile, we had 50 decibels. And when you're in the max fan noise profile, we got all the way up to 56 decibels. That is pretty loud, but that's not as loud as you can possibly go. I mean, 50 decibels is very quiet overall for a gaming laptop. 56 is like average for a loud laptop. 60 plus is like extreme. So 56 is reasonable. Now you can see with either fan profile, the GPU temperature was very reasonable, hitting at 70 degrees and 69 degrees. But the downside here is that the average CPU temp hit up to 97 degrees on the max fan profile. And this is kind of the opposite of what you think would happen when you put on max fan. But the simple fact is, when you put it on max fan, there's no more power limitations on the CPU, and it's able to ramp and fully clock that CPU, which is really, really good for performance. We're going to get better performance from it, as you'll see in a second on this next graph. But the downside here is that the temperatures are like through the roof. Here you can see the actual clock speeds during the graph, keeping it on the default fan profile versus the max fan profile. We're getting about 60 higher clock on the max fan profile for the GPU. Now the GPU performance is not that dramatic, you know, just like 5% difference. But with the CPU, you're talking about a massive bump in performance, 3.8 gigahertz versus 3.2 gigahertz. Now the main reason for this is that the CPU power limit is raised when you're on the high performance setting. And this high performance setting is really nice. I'm really glad that they included this, but the downside here is that the CPU is just not being cooled well enough, and that's really because of two main reasons. First of all, I highly doubt that HP's paste job is very good on the CPU. We're probably not transferring the heat very well out of the system. So that could be alleviated by repasting the CPU. I'm imagining that you're gonna get dramatically better temps, and you may even increase the average CPU clock in a test like this. If the stock CPU paste was good, then that means we're just looking at an insufficiently sized fan, or maybe not enough heat pipes going directly to the CPU, because we're getting really good temperatures on the GPU, but it's just the CPU that is really struggling and overheating in this laptop. Last but not least, we have the speaker loudness test, and we hit 81.5 decibels, which is good for the laptop, and the speakers on this thing are surprisingly good. Here, take a listen.
Even if it makes me blind, I just want to see the light. Breathe in, leave it all behind.
Those are some above average speakers. I'm really impressed, actually. I wasn't expecting the speakers to be quite that good. So in conclusion, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. Let's talk about the pros first. Superb GPU performance. Like, the GPU temps and performance is fantastic even during the stress test. Another positive is that the keyboard and touchpad are good for this price range. They're not great. They're not the same thing as an ultra premium like Razer laptop, but you're getting something that's very functional, and that's really what matters. Now, another great thing about this laptop is that you're getting great storage options for the money. You're getting 128 gig SSD, so you can put, you know, your main applications that you're going to use and maybe 1 or 2 games on that SSD, and then all the rest of your photos and videos and games goes on the 1 terabyte HDD. This gives you a lot of flexibility for this price point. And last but not least, this thing has an excellent selection of ports. You're really not going to be disappointed and be unable to plug in something that you need to. That said, let's talk about the downsides here. First of all, this laptop is going to be thicker and heavier than your Max Q equivalent laptops, and that's just because it has a full-fledged RTX 2060. But the good thing is that you're getting really good performance, especially for the money. So I think it's totally worth having just a slightly thicker laptop to get that extra performance. But of course, if you prefer something that's thinner and lighter, go for something like that. Just know that you're going to be sacrificing a good amount of performance. Now, I touched on this a moment ago, but we have high CPU temperatures on this machine, and it's just kind of disappointing, honestly, that the CPU temps are as bad as it is. Of course, that begs the question of, should you even buy this laptop because of the high CPU temperatures? And here is my take on that. Now, 97 degrees that we got on the high power mode is certainly a little bit high, and higher than I would like to run a laptop on regularly. So if you want to run it at that high performance mode, I would recommend repasting the CPU to get the maximum performance. And then honestly, you're gonna have better performance than what we even got, because we saw a lot of thermal throttling. And I think that's just a fact. For another $15 and about an hour of your time, you can have a dramatically more powerful laptop. So that would be my biggest recommendation. Now, if you're afraid of doing that, of taking your laptop apart and repasting it, I would just recommend keeping it in the default power mode, the power mode that power limits the CPU and keeps the temperatures at a reasonable level. Even at that power limited level, this laptop is still putting out really good performance for the money. Now, the last downside is the bloatware, and I touched on this earlier, but just reinstall Windows 10, do a fresh clean install, and install only the essential drivers that you need, because the bloatware is really bad on this machine. Now, of course, you could always just pick all the applications and uninstall them, but that'll honestly take longer than just reinstalling Windows 10. So that's what I would recommend doing. So if you're looking for a powerful gaming laptop, about $1,300, you don't really care about its look or its premium feel, you just really want the most bang for the buck, I would recommend either getting this one or the Acer Predator Helios 300. Those are the two main laptops to really take a look at. That said, if you're looking for something that has more of a premium feel, a very similar level of performance, I would highly recommend taking a look at the Asus GX531. I'll have a link to the GX531 review at the end of this video if you want to check it out. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to hit that like button, and if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys in the next one. Brandon out.